Today, I want to talk about something we don't honestly name enough: the womb. Not as an idea, not as a political symbol, not as a role, but as a biological reality. Because this isn't about politics or roles. It's about understanding the body as it actually exists and what happens when systems forget that. The womb exists inside a body, and that body is not abstract. It needs rest. It needs nourishment. It needs safety. It needs time. It is sensitive to stress. It responds to environment. It adapts, but at a cost. The struggle is not in the womb itself. The struggle is that the womb exists inside a body the world was never designed to accommodate. Because life does not begin in productivity, it begins in containment, in protection, in slowness, in regulation. The womb does not hurry. It does not optimize. It does not scale. It forms life on biological time. And then that body, the body that can hold life, is expected to live in a world that demands the opposite: constant availability, linear outputs, no interruptions, no cycles, no pause. As if the body could simply forget what it is. The world treats accommodation as weakness. It treats rest as indulgence. It treats care as inefficiency. It treats dependency as failure. But every human being alive began in total dependency. That contradiction matters. The womb is not fragile. The womb is powerful. But power still requires conditions. Just because something can adapt does not mean it should have to suffer. When we talk about pregnancy, childbirth, caregiving, exhaustion, we often miss the real issue. The issue is not biology. The issue is that we build systems that deny the biological truth of the body. A body that can create life is a body that needs rhythm. A body that carries life is a body that cannot be treated as interchangeable. A body that houses a womb is a body that requires accommodation, not apology. And that body moves through phases, monthly, seasonally, across decades. It bleeds, it swells, it contracts, it nourishes, it shifts hormones, it transitions through fertility, it transitions out of fertility. Perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. Each stage alters temperature, energy, sleep, cognition, metabolism. And yet, our workplaces, our cities, our medical systems, our expectations of productivity rarely account for any of it. And when systems consistently fail to support the biological realities of the body, something predictable happens. People adapt. Some delay children. Some decide not to have them. Some quietly opt out of parenthood altogether. Not because life has lost value, but because the conditions to sustain it feels unstable. When creating life becomes economically risky, professionally penalized, or physically unsupported, birth rates fall. Connection thins. Generational continuity weakens, not out of rebellion, out of misalignment. A system that depends on future generations must make room for the bodies that create them, not just products, but the logistical, biological, and structural conditions required for life itself. We design infrastructure as if the human body is static. It isn't. And systems built on false assumptions eventually fracture. There is another layer to this. When the body speaks, who gets to interpret it? Who defines reality? The body itself, the data we can measure, or the authority explaining it? For centuries, systems of medicine were meant to be lenses, ways to understand patterns. But lenses are not laws. Biology is not a slogan, and embodiment cannot be outsourced. When frameworks become rigid, when interpretation becomes prescription, when authority overrides sensation, people disconnect from their own signals. And once a body stops trusting itself, it becomes easier to manage, easier to instruct, easier to override. But a body that can create life was never meant to be managed. It was meant to be understood. And this isn't about special treatment, it's about reality-based design. Because you cannot build a world that depends on bodies while pretending bodies doesn't exist. The womb didn't fail the world. The world failed to remember what it was built from. And I'm not saying this to shame anyone. I'm saying it because forgetting has consequences. It shows up as burnout, as resentment, as disconnection, as people disappearing from their own lives. When the world refuses to accommodate the body pays the price, quietly, slowly, over generations. For me, this stopped being theoretical because I learned this the hard way. Years ago, in 2017, someone medical professionals had already deemed unfit to drive slammed into the passenger side of my car. The impact pushed my sedan into a truck. That truck hit another vehicle behind it. 4 vehicles, 1 moment, and a nervous system, body and mind, that would take years to recalibrate. I lived for years inside a body that could not tolerate light, could not tolerate sound, could not tolerate motion, could not tolerate stress. Restaurants felt like auditory violence. Artificial lighting and screens felt like visual violence. Infrastructure felt like it had been designed without ergonomics or any real understanding of the human body. Breath felt disrespected because smell activates memory and emotion, and not everything in society smells safe or clean or oxygen rich. Touch felt unwanted. Mobility felt restricted. And yet I still showed up for work, for social activities, for survival. When you have a concussion, the world becomes too loud. And concussion is not just pain. It's vision, depth perception, light sensitivity, the brain struggling to interpret space. When your visual system is disrupted, the world tilts. Screens overwhelm. Fluorescent lights feel aggressive. Motion disorients. You realize how much of functioning depends on a stable sensory field. And infrastructure does not adjust for that. Offices are still bright. Traffic still moves. Screens still demand attention. But the body is not ready. And it wasn't just my brain. It was my fascia, which is the connective tissue that wraps the entire body. After impact, fascia does not guard one place. It reorganizes the whole system around protection. And when fascia communicates and moves, it is not subtle. Because fascia doesn't just tighten like a pulled muscle. It reorganizes the whole architecture of you. It wraps muscle. It sheaths bone. It cradles organs. It threads through vessels. It listens to the nervous system. And when the nervous system says danger, fascia answers. I felt it, not just in my shoulders or ribs. I felt layers, superficial, deep, structural. The layers that hold posture, the layers that stabilize the spine, the layers that suspend the organs in place. It was as if my entire internal scaffolding had shifted, not broken, but braced. My body wasn't only guarding one injury, it was guarding the possibility of another one. And fascia does not guard halfway. It guards completely. It compresses. It narrows. It shortens and it binds. Protection is intelligent, but protection held too long becomes a cage. And I could feel the cage. Because when I inhaled, the breath didn't move freely through soft tissue. It met resistance. It met memory. It met a network that had decided contraction meant survival. And the deeper I went into healing, the more I realized fascia remembers impact. Fascia remembers stress. And fascia also remembers fear, not as thoughts, but as tension patterns, as holding, as subtle internal compression that most people never notice until they have to. And I had to notice. Because I could feel my organs. I could feel the density around my ribs. I could feel how laughter had to pass through guarded tissue before it could leave my body. I was not just relearning breath. I was negotiating with fascia, teaching it that the world was no longer about to collapse onto me, teaching it that expansion was safe, teaching it that it could soften slowly, and it wasn't isolated. It wasn't just ribs or shoulders, it was continuity. From the base of my skull, down the back of my neck, across my shoulders, along my spine, into my lower back, through my pelvis, down the back of my legs, into my calves, into my heels, into my toes, I could feel the lines. The long chains of muscle and connective tissue that run through the body. If my ribs guarded, my pelvis responded. If my jaw tightened, my hips narrowed. If my breath stalled, my hamstrings shortened. Nothing was separate. It was one continuous system. And when one part braced, the whole network adjusted. That's what people don't understand. We don't live in parts. We live in layers. And those layers communicate. So when I say I had to relearn how to inhabit my body, I mean I had to feel those connections. I had to feel how my back spoke to my legs, how my breath influenced my spine, how my jaw tension echoed into my pelvis. It wasn't theoretical, it was sensory. And once you feel the layers, you can't unfeel them. And it showed up like this: my shoulders lifted, my ribs narrowed, my pelvis braced, my jaw tightened. And when I was sitting still, my body was preparing for harm. Fascia is protective, but protection held too long becomes confinement, and breath moves through fascia. So when fascia guards, expansion feels unsafe. After the accident, breath was no longer automatic. When air entered my body, I felt resistance, tension along my ribs, constriction across my diaphragm, guarding I had never consciously noticed before. Most people inhale without thinking. I inhaled and I felt pain. So I had to relearn how to breathe. Not metaphorically, physically, slowly, deliberately, without forcing. Because breath is not philosophical, it's mechanical, biological, foundational. And infrastructure affects breath. Air quality, ventilation, the lungs of buildings, the systems that circulate air. When those fail or are neglected, people don't collapse immediately. They slowly constrict. Fatigue increases. Focus drops. Anxiety rises. Healing slows. Breath is capacity. And capacity depends on environment. Cities do not slow down because your nervous system is overwhelmed. Buses still jolt forward and stop hard. Trains still shake and compress air in crowded spaces. Glass towers still reflect gray skies and sewer vapor. Now imagine being neurologically injured and existing inside that. We designed transportation, workspaces, and schedules as if every body operates at full neurological capacity. They don't. It took more than 5 years to rebuild. 5 years of teaching my body that it no longer needed to brace. 5 years of unwinding fascia that believed contraction meant survival. In the summer of 2023, I finally had 2 months pain-free. 2 months, and I was so happy. Then came another impact, directly into my driver's side door. This time, there was no concussion, but the constraints were different. I couldn't turn my head left. I couldn't breathe fully past my ribs. I couldn't sit or stand without pain. I could not wear women's clothing. I could not even tolerate cold winter air against my skin. My body wasn't fragile. It was injured. And again, it required time. Time to relearn how to breathe. Time to relearn how to laugh. I remember the first time I could laugh after a year and a half. I had to hug my ribs to let the laughter in. I also needed time to relearn how my body moved through space, time, society, and systems. And also time to inhabit this miraculous machine we call the body. Twice. And then came the third lesson. Not a collision, but suffocation. An apartment at tree level during heavy rain. Humidity rising. Air not flowing. Architecture that didn't allow circulation. Garbage infrastructure outside the window. HVAC systems not functioning properly. You don't need a medical device to tell you when oxygen isn't moving. Your body knows. Your nervous system knows. Breath becomes shallow. Air feels thick. Your chest searches for space that isn't there. I had to relearn how to breathe again for the third time. This time, not from impact, but from environment. And here's what no one prepares you for. Fascia does not forget. The second and third time, my body didn't just respond to new events. It responded to memory. Guarding was faster, deeper, more total, across layers of muscle, around bones, around organs. Even emotional stress activated the same protective tightening. Fascia remembers. It responds to movement, to stillness, to impact, to environment, to nourishment, to the conditions we live inside. It responds to hydration and dryness. It operates quietly until it feels safe to release. And safety is not just emotional. It's architectural, environmental, structural. Today, I can do more physically than I could before any of these injuries. Not because systems carried me. Many collapsed when I needed them most. But I will say this clearly. The health and wellness practitioners who showed up, the physical therapists, body workers, clinicians, breath specialists, movement educators, they mattered. They are part of the ecosystem that kept me alive. But even with their support, the real turning point came when I began listening to my body more than the systems around me. And that is the point. When infrastructure ignores biology, biology does not disappear. The body compensates. The body strains. The body absorbs impact until it can't. If we design landscapes, cities, buildings, schedules, expectations, without respect for fascia, breath, nervous systems, hormones, recovery time, then we are building environments that slowly injure the very bodies they depend on. And bodies remember. Fascia feels and adapts. Breath remembers. And healing takes longer than the system allows. And when systems create pressure without support, that pressure does not disappear. Because when systems fail to support the body, pressure redirects. Sometimes it redirects into competition, into comparison, into judgment between women themselves. When resources feel scarce, when worth feels conditional, when survival feels tied to approval, solidarity fractures. Not because women are inherently adversarial, but because insecure systems manufacture insecurity in people. And insecurity left unchecked looks like policing. Remembering the womb is not about returning to the past. It's about designing the future with honesty, about acknowledging that life begins in vulnerability, and that vulnerability is not a flaw. It is the foundation. Until we build systems that respect the body that creates life, we will keep asking humans to live as something they are not. This is not a demand. It's a reminder. You came from a body that required care, and nothing meaningful grows without it. See you in the next one.